come before you to ask you to open up our minds and our hearts to this law. Because all law is your law. We ask this through your Son, Yahushua. Amen. Do we have any announcements this evening? Okay, Joe, while you're coming up here, I have a brief one also. This is basically for the virtual audience. I included a copy of Jack's Bible study on Nehemiah. If anybody would, I'm not forcing this on anybody. I just thought that it was interesting, and especially pertaining to what we're studying here on the Monday night class. And I've had several responses back from you people out there that have enjoyed it. But I would like to have you either email me or drop me a note or something if you do want that. I don't want to force that tape on anybody, but if you would like the continuance, because we're going to continue the whole thing in Bible study, the whole chapter, or the whole book, and if you would like to receive that, just let me know. I'll be glad to send it out to you. And there's no charge on it. Okay, go ahead, George. Okay. That's God's work. We don't charge for God's work. Can't do that. Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Just like to notify everyone here that there's a group out there called Jail for Judges. Jail is an acronym, stands for Judicial Accountability Initiative Legislation. They're holding a meeting in Mansfield the 22nd of this month. It's at the Denny's Restaurant. Denny's Restaurant, I'll announce this again, but it's on downtown Mansfield. I think that's East 4th Street and something, I forget, near Route 30 there. So if any of you are interested in becoming part of Jail for Judges, might want to come down and listen to what we got to say. That's this Tuesday, 22nd of June. I'll announce it again and give you more specific details, but just to let you know it's coming up.
Go ahead. You want this one? Okay.
Rattle, 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 rattle. It goes on the tape. I had a very, this is Lee Bernasek, and I'm going to just bring forward a little example that we've had from last month. This is June. May was a month that I was a lot of preoccupation, including my oldest daughter's wedding, which I had to travel to Miami. She doesn't live in Miami. She just wanted to be married in Miami. So then she writes a letter to everybody about her wedding and saying she's looking forward to going back to Miami for a honeymoon. So something about Miami she likes. That close to Cuba. So I don't know. So during the month of May, I was gone a lot, and my P.O. box for Is There Justice filled up with requests for the letter of advice. I believe the word is getting out. The letter rogatory, the definitions, certificates of dishonor, certificates of service, all sorts of information in that great packet. And here's the situation. Somebody says, does it ever work? Well, yeah, I guess it does. A fellow who came to this meeting one time, a few months ago, a multitude of problems from another state. Excuse me, I have a little allergy. He seems to have, I think, been intoxicated from a party a little bit, driving a Jeep, and took it over to the side of the road, and it tipped over. And it seems that his driving was noted by policemen and highway patrol, I believe it was, accompanying him to the side of the road. Well, of course, being intoxicated driving, they just went crazy with this fellow. I was very displeased to hear that because of the fact that, these officers are out there to serve their master, and they don't care about the people. So they were doing what they're supposed to do, except they piled it on higher and deeper, higher and deeper. They also included evading, running from the police. Therefore he was also damaged 2 police cars, and they had really racked him over. He had to sign agreements. You know, the old attorneys came on him like, you know, from the state. Oh, you got to sign this, sign this. He wound up in a parole situation, and the parole officer was messing up his life as far as the stories he's given me, which I believe is true. And they were going to charge him $7,000 for damaging police cars. So he purchased a packet, and then he called up occasionally asking for, you know, is this okay? Is this okay? As he was putting things together. What he was doing was he was accepting their offer of $7,000 and everything else they were throwing at him. I'm accepting that. I'm returning it. I'm giving you honor. If you have a claim, please come forward with it. The reason was, he read one police report, said there was no damage to any cars, and then he pulled over. He was too far over, and he rolled it over. And like weeks later, another report came about all the damage. Well, that little flag came up on my head because I have experienced that. Not all policemen, okay, but it is a capability of a policeman hot rodding their 500 horsepower cars and blowing them up or damaging them or what have you. My father was a policeman for his whole career, and I have stories about him and his Harley and his Interceptor cars. And luckily there were deep pockets in the to take care of the damages and what have you. But in the pursuit, you know, things happen. Even out of the pursuit, as he would say sometimes. But so that red flag came up, and I said, I think you're going to be okay, because it didn't make any sense what was happening. Well, he challenged the states, multiple states, on this issue. And in the meantime, he was going and being advised by a public pretender, as Jack says, public defender, or an attorney. And he said, what should I do with this fellow? I said, well, accept him. He says, this is wonderful. What an honor. So he did that. And everything he did. He did his letters of advice. He put this attorney in on a certificate of service. He went all the way down the line. He followed the procedure. When he received a response from one of the state attorneys, he accepted that and returned it. It was an incomplete response. It was one of this, you know, more of the typical BS or I'll scare you. Now, he was quite nervous because these are felonies. I mean, these are serious stuff. And they started loading up on him. Then they started telling him things like, well, if the judge gets a hold of this and what you're doing in this paperwork you're doing, if you continue this paperwork as your public defender, I won't be able to do anything. Sign, good sign. He's on the private side, can't trespass over there. So all the words were coming out right. He said, and there's a likelihood that the judge won't accept everything and just going to come down on you. Well, likelihood. That means, he's going in the right direction. So he's gathering up courage because this is the first time through for him on this, and he's a very careful person. He finally sent out his last letter of advice, advising them would be all right if I attach your certificates of dishonor, which he had one, got one certificate of dishonor on him, on one of the persecutors. And since it was the only name he could find would respond, he asked them would be all right if I attach their certificate of dishonor to my petition for judicial notice for an order of the court to dismiss these charges. And he talked to me about what he wanted to do. And I said, well, why don't you throw in there any time, all time to be served is to be eliminated, no parole. Just zero the whole thing out. I mean, if they're totally dishonorable, you probably don't deserve to have anything against you. Give it a shot. He did put it all in there. Hey, this is it. All right? Would it be all right if I get request an order for the court? Well, in the meantime, a lot of things happened. In the meantime, somewhere along the line, a motion came forward to hold a hearing on the value of the amount of money that he owed for this damage. Since they had never had a hearing on this, there was no evidence at all what kind of damage it was, and the court they just can't say pay this money without having a hearing. It has to come forward. So they were going to have it on this month, June, I believe, mid-month or the first full week in June or something like that. Maybe it's next week. So he's putting his letters in pretty quick. And then he put his petition in to the court, did his copies, certificate of service, all the way down the line. And when he did that, and he was all served, all of a sudden the public pretender, calls him up and says, they're willing to drop it. First there was at 7,000. Then he dropped it to 6,000. Then they're going to drop it to 5,000. Well, he was getting a little scared because these people are coming on real hard, like, you're going to have jail time. You're not cooperating. So what he did was he said, I'll tell you what I can do. I can come up with $4,000, but it's got to release everything. We'll get back to you. I mean, you got to understand, he had certificates of dishonor and he was going into a trial. They came back and they said, we'll see you at court date with our agreement that for $4,000 you're off the hook. Forever. And it's completely gone. Alright? Now, I know, he says, little remorse, buyer's remorse, maybe I could have got for less and all that. But that was his comfort at that point. He was comfortable then. He decided, can we stop it at this point? Now, since they had no claim, and they couldn't respond to his paperwork other than with, the BS kind of stuff, and he had the certificates on them, and he went to the court, he got a petition, he served at the court, they were setting up a court date, he's going back, I think Friday, he went back for a consolidation to make sure that his petition would be heard for them to come and show good cause why they shouldn't be following the order of the court of dismissal. At the same time, the motion to hear if there was a claim, did they really have anything that he had to pay for? Because they claimed, we have receipts from the repair shop. Well, where's the damage on the day of the accident? I mean, whoopee. So they had all kinds of things that were thrown at him. That's when he had decided, I can come up with 4. But he loaded it up with, I want expunged. And that's the deal he got. Now that wouldn't have happened unless he was standing in their face and they had those certificates of dishonor. It seems like the agents of the government do not want to go into a trial with a certificate of dishonor and a petition for an order of the court. And he wrote the order of the court because I said, you have to do that. So, oh yeah, that's right, you got to do that. So he wrote up the order of court. What he wanted the court to do. Plain English. Put it down, so ordered. And the court accepted that. He says, wow, cool. They were just waiting for those highway patrolmen to come walking in with their attorneys. So, and the judge seemed to be real smart on this. For the judge, highly intellect, notified the state and all the esquires involved, and there was a ton of them, that he would be hearing this in juvenile private court. He would not go in public. He would go into juvenile and hear it. They're going to have this trial in juvenile. All on the private side. And the states just didn't want this to happen. And, yeah.
What was your opinion then had he killed somebody in the truck and suit?
I have no opinion. I am not here to testify.
I'm saying.
And you're not on the microphone. So that's not even being recorded. He wouldn't want that on the microphone. I can't stipulate on any type of a thought process that I would have. The bottom line is there has been no injury and no damage. There's been no claim. So if there are just charges, okay, you can live with that. If you can't, then go out, empty out your silver as much as possible to anybody with their hand out, because that's what you're going to be doing. Unless you've damaged, you've injured. Jack once said, it was very cute. He goes, okay, you have this Roman road, and this person is running down the road and weaving in and out of people as he's running down the road, And, and everybody's going, well, what are you running for? What are you running for? And you tell me, should that person be paying out of their livelihood just for running down the road? Nothing happened? No. This is, see, when you say, well, they were intoxicated, they should be punished for that. Well, he was punished for that. He rolled his Jeep over and he turned off the road. He received the punishment for that. I mean, he didn't, we didn't pay for the repair of his Jeep, and he also had encountered a lot of loss and the whole works. But he had personal loss. I'm not saying deliberately go out there and be reckless. Nobody should go out and be reckless. But for Pete's sakes, if you have an encounter and you've already had remorse and you've already didn't do any harm, but just to yourself or what have you, why should the agent of the government come down and persecute you on a lie? I mean, it's just like having some agent of the government knock on your door just because they had a bad day and decide you're it and start just taking whatever they want. All the charges in the world don't go anywhere unless they have a claim. So this process of returning for value and doing anything acceptance, keeping in honor, it is your part of discovery, that is your right of discovery, and it functions very well. I mean, we've had it function wonderfully. This is not the first time. I mean, I've had a lot of people write me and send me things saying that they've used the process and it all ended. Now, we went over one small process in that I don't have time for all that. I mean, this is what happened. They got a citation or something. Here's a situation that this young fellow then came to me with. He says, what do you think we could do about this? He had a friend and I believe this is the proper story and it's close to it, if not, close enough. A dog got loose. Dog's out running around. And somehow the dog got cornered and the police assisted in cornering the dog and getting it back. All right. They performed a wonderful service. Well, they cited her $100 for having a loose dog. The prosecutors, got a hold of this and decided to, just up the ante. They upped the ante to, I don't know, somehow she had mismarked her calendar as to when the hearing was going to be, so she didn't come to the hearing. Why a hearing for a citation on a dog? Okay. So, the prosecutors went ahead and said for missing it, it was some, couple $1,000, and then they loaded on top of that attorney fees for another $1,500, and they wanted to pay all this money. And I guess, and her situation was, that's more than I probably make in a year. This was a poor situation. So, what would happen here? Well, there's no time for, acceptances and all that. This whole time frame is like, right now, they have a hearing. So I said, well, let's go on in there with, full acceptance. I accept, and I plead guilty to all the facts. Not the charges. Don't use that word. Say all the facts. And what I heard was, she went ahead and did that. She said, here to make proper restitution for the fact that the fact that my dog got loose and its return was assisted by the police, and there was a charge for that. She says, I think it was $100, and I plead guilty to all facts concerning this matter. Prosecutor went almost a little ballistic. You can't plead guilty. And the judge, or the magistrate, said, it's been done. What can we do for you today? And he says, yeah, just ask her. And she goes, you can accept my $100 for the restitution for the fact my dog got loose. I feel bad that it happened, but I appreciate the assistance in getting my dog back by the police. He says, I accept. Pay your $100. Thank you very much. Prosecutor didn't get a thing out of this one. No, we'll go get the next sucker. He was mad. You can't plead guilty to the facts. So, some of what we're doing makes sense and it does work. So, I see Jack has now arrived and giving me that look like my seat. That's my chair. That's why I did get on the handheld microphone, because I thought maybe somebody would come up and want to ask questions on the mic, and I wouldn't be hogging it. But that's a good story, and I only will report happy endings. Jack and I are still brainstorming a situation that we're not getting the right results on, and this happens to be a situation where a mother has taken 2 children out of the state without authority. It is a kidnapping. We got all kinds of things happening. I believe the court had made a mistake, and they're trying their darndest to let it, I mean, people make mistakes. And what happens if the court makes a mistake? And I have had that happen in the past. I've seen magistrates and judges make mistakes, and it's very, very difficult to turn that around. They will discourage you from that as long as they can. And we're not sure if indeed the judge made a mistake in this case, or if the parties have made a mistake. And so the clerk of the court has been trying to help the father out to find these 2 children and to do what they can. And they made a good suggestion, and the father's following up on it because he didn't understand the suggestion. And that was, you need legal advice. Well, that's wonderful. Now, he took it as, they're trying to make me go see an attorney. Yeah. There might be in Oklahoma right now. And so consequently, this is like a long distance kind of situation. But anyhow, he comes back with me, he says, they said legal advice. And I said, deja vu, it happened to me once. And the court says legal advice, and I was a little testy with that. And I said, you just want me to go to an attorney. He says, wait a minute. The courts have their own legal departments. And so he's making a appointment now to go to the legal department and go over the procedures. Because the clerk had invited this. And so he's going to accept that with honor and do that. And I did the same thing many, many years ago. And it taught me exactly what I needed to do when I had made my mistakes, where the process would have been. And I did these things, and it just like they were yelling and screaming at me. He says, where did you get all your information? I said, downstairs, room 104. And they go, forget it. But we sometimes forget that. And we don't hear in those words what we're trained. The public education tells us one thing, but sometimes those words are good. So his last thing was when he called, the clerk said, wonderful idea. Congratulated him on interpreting what they have been telling him, get some legal advice. Wasn't go out and get an attorney, that's a waste of time. Go down and talk to our legal department, which will take you through our procedure that we have in this court. Because there's 88 counties, there's 88 different courts, 88 different procedures, and who knows what they have designed and what they have. And so he said, great. So he's waiting for a return call from their scheduler and all that to do that. So these things are not to be, don't be so afraid that everything is going to be, the sky is falling. Some of the information you receive is really good, and especially if you're persistent and consistent. And I'll tell you, this fella that had the felonies and tipped over his Jeep, and they were trying to get him for all kinds of things, he was giving me the impression that this so-called public defender that was hopefully helping him, he was really a wonderful help, because this fella acted as the liaison, being an officer of the court, and a liaison, and kept doing the structured bidding back and forth, and then came up with the final contract. So if you're using these attorneys properly, they're very useful. And he kept doing that. He kept putting that fella on every certificate of service. He was never in the dark. And he put everybody on that certificate of service. And he kept doing that, and it took him about 2.5 months to go from, parole forever, and and being bashed, to, hey, I'm looking forward to next week. So I do believe that there's a lot of pressure out there, and you know, you're going to be by yourself, and so you're going to make your own comfort position. But you see, he was in the lead on that. He was in the lead. Then he said, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I'll say I want better than 4. Now you're going to be in dishonor, and they're going to say everything you've done is dishonorable, and they're going to start the whole process all over again, except you're going to be, you know, minus. And I said, no. I said, once you start that, I said, you can't have remorse on this thing. You got to keep going, and that's what all these processes are. Once you start, just because you think you got a little bit, don't fall into that trap. So anyhow, unless there's any questions on these two or three examples, I'll turn it over to Jack, who was saying, probably start with, now that we're getting a late start.
Okay, while Jack's coming up here, we've had a challenge put to us that for Joni and Richard and for the in prison, whatever collection we can take up this evening, this individual will match it. So if that's any incentive at all to reach deep, fine. Not.
I have a reach deep. The letters of advice, a person sent in a generous contribution, in my estimation. And so, what I will do is, from that generous contribution, I want to keep things going. I will take $50 out of that and make sure that Joni and Rich get some of that. All right. And this happens occasionally. People send me things, and I'm doing God's work, and so I'm not taking this. But when I see this, I will, I will let that happen. And then if we have something else that pops up, then, it's like a micro fund that I have, and it's only going to be used for making copies. Again, if you need the packet of letters of advice and certificate of service and dishonor and letters rogatory, the whole training manual, people sometimes email me or what have you, by going to the post office box and asking for if they can contact me and ask questions, which is okay. The address for that is There Justice, P.O. Box 24670, Cleveland, Ohio 44124. The price for mailing out the packet is $12. If people in the meeting want a packet, it's $6. Mailing costs and labels and everything are all taken in, so it's a break-even point. Copy costs are just probably maybe close to $6, not a little bit more. They keep moving around the number, but it's a good deal, and it is an instruction package. Please, virtual and real audience here, the answers aren't going to be laid out, so all you have to do is write your name on the blank, and that's it. So people call me and I says, you've tailored this to your particular situation. And everybody who has read it, studied it, looked at it, made some sense, listened to the tapes, listened to Jack, they've had a lot of success with this, and seen agents of the government just back right on off. So it's not a bad deal.
Jack, did you by chance were able to look up that Ohio Revised Rule 1, Code Rule 1?
No, I have not yet, Bob.
I haven't either. For the people out there and the ones here in the meeting, I talked here 3 weeks ago about the being told that there is no law, that Rule 1 is gone out of the Ohio Revised Code, and all 5 or 6 places in Columbus, the historical Secretary of State, the Clerk of Courts, all of wherever they're at. If you want to look it up, go to the Ohio Revised Code, Rule 1. It seems that they, for some reason or other, had a fire, had water damage, but only Rule 1 was damaged. It ain't there. So there is no law out there other than what God gave us in the first place, as far as I can see. Thank you.
Okay, we're back after 1 week absence. I promised you copies of the transcripts that we read into the record last time from the Matrix. I've got, I think, about 30 copies here. Caleb, if you want, you can pass them out. If you guys want to put in an extra buck or something to donation to help defray some of that later on, I'd appreciate it. But if you don't have it, don't worry about it. Looks like somebody put reading material up on my desk. They've got the grin of the shark coming out of the movie Finding Nemo. I don't know if anybody has seen that this weekend, but it had about a $70-some million opening. The best opening for a comic-style movie of all times. It's kind of cute, especially for kids. Adults probably get a big kick out of it, too. It's really a story of a prodigal son. Nemo is the son of a daddy fish who they lost both Nemo's mother and all of his brothers and sisters to an attack by another giant fish toward the start of the movie. And so Nemo's daddy has to raise Nemo, and he's being a little bit overprotective of him. And because of that, Nemo kind of rebels and swims out from the protected reef out into the ocean. And when his father told him not to, so he disobeyed his dad, he got picked up by a scuba diver who was netting and collecting exotic fish for this dentist's fish tank back in Australia. And so he got captured by an alien government, so to speak. And the majority of the movie deals with the redemption of Nemo, trying to bring him home to his daddy. What was most interesting is that along the way, his daddy and this other lady fish that are out looking for him meet these 3 sharks. And at first they're really, really upset about these sharks that look like they're going to attack the little fish and eat them. But it turns out that the sharks are kind of going through this session much like ex-alcoholics go through Alcoholics Anonymous. And they were learning to recite the mantra that fish are good, fish are not food, and that we're going to stop eating fish and attacking them and killing them, which is kind of like the concept in Scripture of the lion laying down with the lamb. Or it's kind of like what we've been learning, that you can't prevail by going out and charging your brother and killing him. You've got to prevail through love by taking care of his obligations and paying his debts. So Nemo is kind of a sweet little movie. There was another one that was out this weekend, did not fare quite so well at the theater, and that's The Italian Job. It's a con man movie where this team of 6 men decide to rip off a safe in Venice, Italy, containing about $40-some million worth of gold bullion. And when the 6 guys rip it off and are successful, it turns out one of the guys in the gang is a turncoat, and he's hired himself some other people to rip off the gang. And he ends up killing one of the 6 guys that was in that original gang, the father of that gang. And he believes that he has killed the other 4 members of the gang other than himself. And so he comes back to America here with all of his loot to enjoy the rewards of his little caper. Needless to say, 4 of his buddies were survivors, and they tracked him down. He was living in California by Hollywood, and when they found out where he was living, they decided that they were going to pull another caper to get the gold back from their ex-partner who had betrayed them. And to do that, they would have to open a safe in this guy's house. And it turns out that this one lady was the daughter of the man who was killed in that gang. She got called in to help them go open the safe and steal the money from him before he understood what was going on. So the gang that was after the turncoat were 4 men and 1 woman, which represents 4 of the things of the world, and the woman is the church. Now the man who was killed had said early on to the head member of this guy that he was getting out of being a robber and a thief. And they had a discussion, and it was an interesting discussion because the older gentleman, played by Donald Sutherland in this movie, said, you either steal for wealth, or you steal to define who you are. And in the end, when the gang of 4 plus 1 went to pull off their caper, they kept saying, we are not in it for the money. We are in it for the principle of the thing. And so once again, I remind you of basically what we're learning, that basically all of commerce is evil. That the whole concept of dealing with money cannot be supported anymore under any law because there is no money. It was taken out of existence and does not exist. And if you deal with it in any way, shape, and form, you're dealing with a fiction and illusion. So there is no such thing as good commerce. All there is selling your labor or using your labor to serve your brother. And if you see what Hollywood is doing in most all of the films that they're doing today, they're really picking up on these concepts and these ideas. And that's exactly what Lee was talking about earlier. When we're going into court now, you can't go into court under the concept that you're there basically working commerce. You're there in order to discharge any commercial liabilities by a prepaid account, which is not money anymore. It was prepaid. The money is gone, but the account was established presumptively when money existed. Therefore, you can discharge liabilities by the way thereof without having to go in and attempt to pay. We have had a lot of interesting things going on, and I want to cover a couple of pretty interesting things this evening that I think you will enjoy. Number one, there are 3 guys up in Michigan right now that are arrested and in jail. One of them is one of my really good friends, and he's been doing a lot of this commercial process, but he has been doing some things lately that he and Barbara Bush have kind of been advocating, at least in terms of concepts of how to deal with some things when you attempt your commercial process and it appears as though the public officers and officials are not doing anything with regard to your draft request to resolve and close the case. And Elvick and Barbara Bush have lately been going into this concept that you give notice to the public officials of intent to bring tort claim actions against them for they supposedly having done something to you which trespasses on your property rights, and they won't resolve and close the matters in the public. So you give them notice of tort claims, and then if they don't respond to that and dishonor that, you go ahead and file a tort action against them, presumably with their consent because they failed to come back. Now these 3 people that are up in Michigan right now, 2 of them are involved once again in the concept of property tax issues. And that's probably one of the hardest issues that's going on out there in a lot of respects. Now, I'm not going to say it can't be done right because I've had people that I've seen their paperwork, they've done a property tax issue correctly, They have not been arguing with the public officials. I've had several people tell me that the process they've used, and they've taken different tactics in several of the cases I've seen, generally has resulted in the county officials, if they came back once or so testing, they usually, after you deal with that, haven't come back. So there's ways of doing it right, but the worst way to do it is go in there and claim you're a sovereign, that you own your property, and that they have no claim on it whatsoever and can't do anything to you. And if they don't get their blankety blank off your property, be it paperwork or physical, whatever they're doing, that they're going to be in big trouble. That's creating a war. But two of these people out of the three up in Michigan are involved in the property tax issue. And what ended up happening is there were a bunch of real estate people and other people that think they picked up property at a tax sale from the county. The county gave them tax deeds. My friend and this other person ended up going through an administrative process. In the administrative process, the people that allegedly bought the property, the county officials, no one answered and responded. So they went to a notary public, and through the notary public sent out certificates of protests and notarized affidavits for our heroes and all this other kind of stuff. Now, this didn't just happen overnight. This process has been going on for about 2 years. And even as far back, since we're in the start of June now, 2003, even as far back as middle or end of February, the two people that were directly involved knew that law enforcement officers were, quote, investigating what they were doing, unquote. There was a raid by law enforcement officers on the office of the public notary at the end of March, and they had a warrant, and they seized all of the papers and the documents that the notary was holding in his office pursuant to this particular matter. They did not arrest him at that time. About middle of May, they came in and arrested the two people, my friend and the other one working with him, on a felony warrant charge, and they arrested the public notary on a felony warrant charge too. The charges basically accuse all three of these people. Let's see if I can get a copy of some of this so I don't misstate what they're doing. Count 1, criminal enterprises conducting. Being a person employed by or associated with an enterprise, to wit, a group of persons associated in fact, did knowingly conduct or participate in the affairs of the enterprise directly or indirectly through a pattern of racketeering activity consisting of two or more of the following incidents of racketeering. And what they did in the charge of racketeering is they basically came in and they said that by the administrative process that these people were using, that their letters to the people that bought the property supposedly on the tax sale, that those letters basically were acts and actions as part of their racketeering activity and pattern and practice to extort money or any pecuniary advantage whatsoever, to compel the person so threatened to do or refrain from doing an act against his or her will contrary to state statutes. And they got about like 10 or 15 incidences with different people in that capacity. Now, they alleged that the two people who were trying to adjudicate by private administrative process the issue of who had best claim or title to the land and who didn't, their process of using the administrative procedure of letter writing was deemed to be a criminal extortion racket with a major felony count. And that's exactly what the gentleman